welcome back to the Saturday Scholars College Football Podcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. That is Zan. That is Gonzo. I am Shub. And today we are here to do Week 9 recap. Let's go. Boys, the college football playoff rankings are upon us. We, the Saturday Scholars, have come up with our own college football playoff rankings, the Saturday Scholars Top 10. And we will compare it to the committee later on this week. But that's going to be sort of a live reveal later on this pod, so stay tuned in for that. I have crunched the numbers, and we have a top 10, and there are definitely some things that are going to differentiate ourselves compared to what most other people will have. So stay tuned for that later on in the pod. But boys, before we get to that, we got to tackle what happened last week in Week 9. Now, for the most part, I'm not going to lie, it was kind of a snoozer week, so to speak. There was a lot of blowouts, a lot of teams that were favored, won by a lot. There were a handful of smaller surprises, but there was one game that I think stood out the most, and that was Oklahoma versus Kansas. That was probably the most surprising result of the week, if you ask me, and I think that's where we need to start. But boys, how we doing? We ready to get going?
Let's do this, man. Yeah, it was a good week of football, man. Good week of football. Me being a Oklahoma State fan, seeing Ollie Gordon potentially maybe backdoor his way into the Heisman conversation if he's able to have a good week against OU this week. And to see OU lose, as an OSU fan, it's an amazing week. So, yeah, I'm doing great, boys. Doing great.
Gonzo, you recovering from that Halloween party?
That's what I like about the Halloween party. It's always during the LSU bye week. So gives me a lot of time to help my girlfriend out with some desserts and whatnot. And I did catch most of the slate. Unfortunately, missed tonight's slate, but thank God, like you said, that OU Kansas game was one of the first things we had on the agenda for Saturday.
Yeah, let's get to it. And by the way, I'm not a Diamondbacks fan, but I had to rep them because they're the hometown team for me now. But I also got my Rangers hat here, so I'm going to do a little switcheroo midway through the pod, but got to rep both teams in the World Series. Shout out to our buddy RJ, who works for the Texas Rangers. And if you're watching this, I'll know you if you're watching this because you're going to call me out for wearing the D-backs hat. So that's how I'll know. But if you are, don't worry. I'm going to throw this on later.
RJ, before we started recording, he said he's a Diamondbacks fan now.
Yeah, being a Marlins fan is just pain upon pain. But no, I'm kidding. No.
He'll come back to the Fish when they're good.
Repping the hat. All right. OU Kansas. Let's get to it. Well, listen, all I got to say is this was kind of a weird game. And it was weird from the sense that it seemed like Oklahoma had opportunities to put this game away. It seemed like Kansas also had opportunities to tack on when they had leads at times. And it was kind of a weird game. There were turnovers. If I'm not mistaken, I think there were 5 total turnovers by both teams. The fourth quarter really ended in kind of a weird way, and somehow Kansas won this game and handed Oklahoma their first loss of the season. Guys, what are your takeaways?
I thought so I was texting you guys because I was going ballistic, man. Towards the end of the game when Devin Neal decides, instead of going down at the 1, he decides to score the touchdown and go up, 5 points? And then, of course, they can get the 2. But I was going ballistic, man, because I was thinking, you are an idiot. They have over a minute left. You don't have Alabama's defense, bro. I mean, Dillon Gabriel has done this before. What are you doing, Devin Neal? So dumb, but luckily they were able to hang on. And I was thinking for sure OU's going to win this game now, just because this dude had to score and didn't have the clairvoyance to go down, run the clock, and kick basically an extra point to win the game. But hey, Kansas hung on. Credit to the Jayhawks defense. But man, I was livid about that decision making.
There were 6 total turnovers, by the way, 3 from each team. So it wasn't like turnover margin had a lot to do with this, even though it did, but it also didn't. Gonzo, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm a history guy, and it was mind-blowing to me that the last time Kansas had beaten Oklahoma, my brother Tyler's, let me get this right, he's 25 right now. He hadn't even been born. It was October of 97. He was born November of 97. And just an incredible win for KU, for the fans who've been rooting for this team for like decades, I'm very happy for them, more so than like the freshmen who just enrolled, like those lifelong KU fans. That an incredible win. Jason Bean, I didn't I don't want to say I doubted him, but I definitely factored him playing over Jalen Daniels as a reason for why I picked the Sooners. But at the same time, we've all acknowledged that he is more than a competent backup and really would start for a majority of programs in the country. And what he did today, it's not going to pop out at you, but he did enough to win. He did have some bad turnovers, but at the end of the day, he converted very critical fourth downs and will always be linked to one of the greatest wins in program history. So for the landscape of college football, this is just humongous. And Lance Leipold, I truly would be shocked if that man is still coaching out there by this season's end. He has done an incredible job in such a short time there.
Yeah, Leipold and Elko, I think, are both on the poach seat. So Michigan State and maybe Clemson, if they decide to move on from Dabo, that's another discussion we'll have later in this pod. But yeah, man, that was definitely a good game to watch for sure. Definitely got treated to a really good one in the early slate there in Kansas. The Sunflower Showdown is going to be interesting. The Sunflower Showdown is going to be interesting this year because that's going to be an elimination game in the Big 12.
Gonzo, your bold prediction about the Sunflower Showdown being first place game for the Big 12. Hey, listen, it's not going to come to exact fruition, but it definitely is like going to be a way more important game than we all thought it would be a few weeks ago. So I'll give you credit for that.
I'll say that's why I love win totals, because I lost the battle that was the weekly pick, but this just put them the push, and I'll be stunned if the Jayhawks don't at least get one more win before the season ends.
They're going over. I took the L on that, but yeah.
Well, a few more things before we move on here. One, so you're telling me 1997 was the last time that Kansas beat Oklahoma. So the three of us were in diapers the last time that Kansas beat Oklahoma. So that's pretty interesting.
I'm still in diapers.
I don't think the Marlins have won the World Series yet. I'm pretty confident because it was early October.
Oh my gosh. Wow. So the Marlins have won 2 World Series since the last time that happened. That's nuts.
The Diamondbacks were either in their first year or they may not
even
they
didn't exist yet. Diamondbacks were 99. Yeah. So this team, the team I'm wearing on my hat right now, did not even exist the last time Kansas beat Oklahoma. So that just goes to show. But anyhow, you mentioned your point about Jason Bean. Listen, Jason Bean was good, but he also wasn't great. In fact, he almost lost them this game. Like that slip screen interception that he threw at the very end there, I was like, what the hell are you doing? That was one of the worst interceptions I've seen all season. He threw it, he just lobbed it right to an OU defender, lollipop on a slip screen. Just a no awareness. He seems like he has his moments. And remember the bowl game against Arkansas last year, that trick play. That was a bad moment. But listen, Jason Bean, he's hot and cold, but at the end of the day, I think Kansas did a good job. The offense does a great job of scheming plays open, which I think they did a great job of. Just the thing that was just really interesting to me that really stood out was I thought OU actually got kind of conservative in this game. They didn't throw the ball as much as they normally do. Shout out to Boomer Uncle Steve, my uncle, who did our picks with us on the team draft earlier. He pointed out Oklahoma only threw the ball 19 times in this game, and that kind of lined up with what I was watching, because I just thinking to myself mentally as I was watching this game, like, why is OU not pushing the ball downfield? Now, the rain may have had something to do with it because there was a drizzle throughout the whole game. There was a lightning delay in the first half as well. So that was definitely an element, but OU just was not as aggressive as I thought they would be. And after being through that ugly slip screen in the fourth quarter, I thought OU was over. I thought OU stomp on the throat, score a touchdown, the game's over, and they didn't. In fact, they didn't even get points out of that drive coming off that turnover. I think just failure to capitalize, and for OU, they were just extremely conservative, and that's kind of what lost them the game. And, we talked about how last week, how we thought OU kind of got pretty fortunate to beat UCF. UCF had a 62% post-game win expectancy last week, despite that OU won. Well, this week, boy, do the turntables turn. This week, Oklahoma had a 69, very nice, post-game win expectancy, but they did not win. So life comes at you fast. Hey, this was karma going both ways, I guess, for Oklahoma. So either way, whether or not they should have lost to UCF or should have lost to Kansas, they evened out. They lost to one of them.
Mhm.
And
I kind of wish they lost both of them though, because I was stupid and took the Oklahoma under. But
listen, I think at the end of the day, I think it's pretty fair, and I think this is the outcome that Oklahoma probably deserved if everything was fair and equal in a vacuum.
For,
But
for for what it's worth, I mean, we saw this happening against BYU down the stretch potentially. For KU, essentially just jumped the line. We knew fairly confidently that OU is not going to finish the season undefeated. In fact, there's really only a handful of that we think probably can actually finish undefeated. And the fact that KU was able to clip OU, I think, is a testament again to just how balanced the big terms of not having atrocious teams at the bottom, minus the newcomers, which we'll talk about that a little later.
well, that kind of transitions into our next short discussion here. Let's zoom out a little bit, just Big 12 as a whole. Now, with the loss from Oklahoma, not a single Big 12 team is undefeated. Every single team at the top has a conference loss. Right now, there is a 5-way tie at the top of the Big 12 between Oklahoma, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, Texas, and Kansas State. Now, a couple of those teams are pretty big surprises considering where we were about a month ago. Did not think we'd get here, but we have a 5-way tie. All 5 of those teams mentioned are 4-1 in the Big 12. And 2 of them, or I should say, 4 of them play each other next week. We got Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State in Bedlam, and then we have Texas versus Kansas State next week. So that's going to sort itself out pretty fast here. But boys, who's going to win the Big 12? I think it's a good question to ask, especially with next week coming up. It's going to be a big one for the Big 12 conference.
well, I don't want to be disrespectful to Iowa State because they have far exceeded expectations this year. But of that group, I would say not Iowa State. I would say Kansas is still very realistically alive, even though they have one extra loss compared to those teams. Kansas State is really hitting their stride right now. That game with Texas this week is crucial. It's basically an elimination game. Whoever loses is out of the Big 12 race. So, dependent on that, if K-State, whoever wins that game, I think is in the Big 12 championship. I think that this game is like a de facto placement game. And then I think the other team will still be OU. We have Bedlam this week. Not going to spoil a pick, but we know how Bedlam traditionally goes. So the history would indicate that Oklahoma State's going to get eliminated this week. So I think winner of Texas K-State will go on to take on OU in the conference championship game.
Call the principal, because I'm copying Zam's homework in this instance. I'm of the same belief that whoever wins between K-State and Texas is going to be a representative in the Big 12, if not just win the regular season title outright. A real super quick schedule breakdown after their matchup. K-State gets Baylor at home, who may have fired Dave Aranda by then. Then you go at KU, that'll be tough. Iowa State, you should win, but that's not going to be a walkthrough. Then I think Texas probably has the edge schedule wise, because after the K-State game, you go at TCU. TCU's not who we thought they were, but maybe they're jacked up because this is the last time they're going to play, maybe forever. And then they go to play Iowa State, who knows, sleepy day names, and then Texas Tech. Like on paper, you should beat all 3 of those. But again, they could get your heel if you are not on your A game. But comparing the schedules, you lean Texas. I'm not giving my hand on who I'm picking in the game. But yes, the winner of that matchup for sure, I think, is in the conference title game and does, in fact, win the regular season crown.
I think both the Oklahoma schools have the easiest schedules remaining after they play each other. And yeah, just
That
a
is
quick
true.
quick look at the schedules. Yeah, I mean, listen, we just complimented Iowa State, yes, but Iowa State still got KU, at BYU, Texas, and then at Kansas State. So Iowa State, hey, look, great, phenomenal season, guys. And they're probably going to get, if they can beat BYU, they might get that over, which is like seems improbable a few weeks ago. So shout out, tip of the cap, but like they're gonna be phased out of the picture here.
They've
So,
already won more games than I thought they would, so
Yeah.
they're doing a great job.
yeah, Iowa State fans should be happy, ecstatic, but let's assume they're going to be phased out of the picture here pretty quickly in the coming weeks. So like you guys said, they're basically, next week is kind of pseudo de facto Big 12 semifinal games, if you want to call it that. I think that's how we're all
It
viewing
really is. Like the teams that lose like, yeah, between Bedlam and Texas K-State, the losers are probably out. The winners are probably going to represent unless they slip up. But even then, they would have a tiebreaker over the team they beat this week. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it's basically elimination week for the Big 12. This is like the probably most important week in the Big 12 to determine the championship.
Absolutely. So I guess we don't want to spoil our picks for predictions, but if you had to name the Big 12 championship game really quick, just name the two teams. Who's it going to be right now? What is the Big 12 championship game?
You know, my brain says OU Texas. That's what I think is most likely. What I want to see is Oklahoma State, Kansas State, but I think it's gonna be OU and Texas. But I'm pulling for K State. I'm pulling for K State to get past Texas.
I think Brett Yormark wants to see Oklahoma State, Kansas State too.
Yeah, I'm gonna mirror Zan exactly there. Same line of thinking.
All right.
And I will say really quick before we get off this seems to be the only conference where you have these kind of games that matter for big picture, for conference picture being played, because super quick, like Big Ten, the big three are taking forever to play each other. And, and the West is an absolute circus right now. So, nothing consequential there just yet. Then in the ACC, it's FSU, and then who in the world wants to be number two? We don't really know yet because some teams are screwing around. SEC, Georgia's got it locked up, and then it was always going to be LSU, Bama. And then the Pac-12, that's another one where, you're hoping they don't cannibalize each other, but I feel like that's going to start happening because some of the top dogs in the league are either struggling or outright losing the teams. So the Big 12, what I'm trying to say is the Big 12 seems like a conference where you have a pretty good idea of natural organic semifinals that are happening at this point in the season that we can point to outside of like two matchups the whole year.
And
That makes
normally,
sense.
normally this is a conference that beats up on each other, and we thought it would be more of the same this year, especially with the newcomers. But the newcomers have really struggled, guys. UCF and Cincy, both winless in conference. They play each other this week, so their first conference win for whichever team gets it, it's not going to be against an OG Big 12 school. It's going to be against a newcomer. And then Houston's 1-4 in league play. BYU's the best team in league play, but they're 2-3 in league play. BYU's got a pretty solid record, but they're 2-3 in league play. So newcomers are definitely getting a little taste. I mean, UCF came in, said they were going to dominate, and they haven't even won the conference game, even with JRP in there. So it's a little bit of humble pie for UCF, but I do think they have a good future.
How many times have we said humble pie for UCF so far this year? I feel like we say it every week, but it's true. Listen, all I'm saying is you guys came over from the AAC. You wanted to be in the Power Five. You were clamoring that, in the Power Five, you should be a playoff team, but you're 0-5 in Big 12 play. And I think we all kind of admit the Big 12 is down this year compared to normal years. Like it's not even that good of a conference this year as it normally is. And they still are 0-5 at conference play. So like, yeah, that definitely some humble pie there. But yeah, I will say though, contrary to what I just said, I do think it is sort of a perception boost for the Big 12. The fact that all four of the newcomers are struggling, I think that actually kind of helps the Big 12's image in a way, because it shows like, okay, G5 level teams can't just walk into the conference and just dominate or like compete for the title game. None of them are even close to that.
And BYU, you put an asterisk on because, again, they've been playing the pseudo-independent Pac-12 schedule for years now. So, again, out of everybody, they at least have some experience in this end of the pool. So it's no surprise that their win total was nailed on that over and that they are actually at least paddling in the water because, yeah, they've got, at least some kind of athletes, older guys playing out there, and they've seen this way more than any of the other three have.
Agreed. All right. Well, we talked a lot of Big 12. We're going to sort of segment this pod by conference this week. That's kind of how we're doing it. So let's move on to the Pac-12. Pac-12, been a lot of topics to talk about every single week. And this week, there's no shortage of that. Let's start with Oregon, Utah. I think we have a few other points we want to make about some of the teams competing for the Pac-12, because I think the picture is now being painted a little bit differently than we would have thought a couple weeks ago. But let's talk about Oregon versus Utah. Now, listen, we sat around, we made a couple videos, we made a short about Utah, just praising them. And, of course, since we did that, Utah just decided to lose their first home game in 18 straight games. Oregon broke that 18-game home winning streak versus Utah. They hadn't lost at home since 2020, since the pandemic. So that just goes to show how much of a home field advantage it's been there in Salt Lake City. But point is, Oregon thoroughly handled Utah, 35-6. What are your takeaways from this?
I'm just shocked. Not necessarily by the outcome, but by the nature of the outcome. We know Utah is a much better team when they play at home. But man, Oregon showed just how good of a football team they are, because Utah, they're not scrubs, especially when they play at home. I know they don't have Cam Rising, but even without him, they've shown to be a very good football team. They have overcome adversity in so many different ways, scenarios, very well coached, great program. But Oregon comes in there and just absolutely slaps you in the face, in front of your mama, and says, what are you going to do about it? And they couldn't do anything about it. So credit to Oregon, man. And, I know Oregon has that head-to-head loss against Washington, but I think Oregon is the best team in the Pac-12. And barring some, overly aggressive play calling in the Oregon-Washington game, they probably win that game. So I'm just saying, man, I think Oregon is the best team in the Pac-12, and especially with Washington, the way Washington's looking here lately, despite being undefeated.
No argument for me.
I think that's a great win for Oregon. Likewise, I did not think they'd win by, 4 touchdowns. Just an incredible coaching job by Dan Lanning, having these guys ready to go. It seems like when the moment has come, even with Washington, they were ready. Colorado, they derailed the hype train. Washington, I mean, you're a field goal away from overtime and maybe winning, and a couple decisions as well from winning. And then you come in here in a game you got to have to stay alive for the conference and nationally, and you kick some serious tail and shut them out in the second half. Man, Dan Lanning, my hat goes off to you, man. Great coaching job.
Dan Lanning is killing it this year, and I agree with you, Zan. Oregon is the best team in the Pac-12. I mean, just listen, they have that loss to Washington head-to-head, but it was basically it was a 3-point loss that almost went into overtime because of a missed kick in Seattle. And you mentioned, you could easily make the argument Oregon was the little bit better of a team in that game. So I think it's pretty obvious Oregon is the best team. And if Oregon and Washington were to play each other on a neutral field today, give me Oregon all day in that game. And real quick, just as far as Utah, hindsight's 2020, but do you think part of this result could have been a fatigue factor? Because listen, we kind of get muddled down and week to week, covering these games and everything and picking these games. But if you kind of zoom out, Utah's last 5 games, they had a rock fight against UCLA. They lost to Oregon State in another rock fight. They got Cal at home and beat them soundly. Then they had to go at USC, won that crazy emotional game, field goal to win it at the buzzer. And then they just played Oregon, who's one of the best teams in the whole country. Those are their last 5 games. I mean, that's a pretty damn tough stretch that they just went through.
The Pac-12 in itself is a meat grinder this year. It's very, very competitive. And yeah, sure, some fatigue, but I mean, all the other teams in the Pac-12 are playing relatively competitive schedules as well. UCLA being the one that kind of gets the least competitive out of the major big boys in the group. But I don't give them that pass. I know that they've had, a tough schedule. That's why their win total is sitting there at 8.5, despite them being a quality team. But I mean, the whole Pac-12 has got to go through it basically.
Fair point.
I think simply Oregon's the better team, and they showed it. The recruiting showed in this game.
So speaking of Washington, we already kind of alluded to them. We have this question written down. Are they out of gas right now? Because it just seems like they are skating by. The last 2 weeks, barely beat Arizona State. In fact, had some help from the officials and a crazy turnover at the perfect time to beat Arizona State. And then they just went and played Stanford and got into a little mini shootout with Stanford, which, you don't want to be in a shootout with Stanford. It's definitely something that's been off. What do we think of Washington right now?
It's kind of concerning because this is the worst time of the year for Washington to kind of be hitting this wall. Maybe they're hitting a fatigue factor. Maybe it's kind of getting to that point. Michael Penix has still been playing well, but not as well as he was last year or in the first half of the season. It seems like maybe some teams have maybe figured out some things that Washington is doing. And then certainly their defense just isn't stepping up. I mean, it's evidenced by Stanford dropping 33. Look, I get it. Stanford's got an absolute beast at wide receiver. I can't even pronounce the dude's name, but that dude is an absolute stud. Yeah. And, but man, this is concerning because I know Washington's undefeated right now, but you have everything on the line right now. In college football, what matters, it doesn't matter. What matters is when you lose. You can have one loss. If you lose early, that's fine. You can always come back. But if you lose late, you may not make the playoffs. So, or you would have to win your conference. So it really matters here. Washington is going to have to get it together. I don't know what's going on with them. I'm thinking maybe fatigue. But they just seemed sluggish the last 2 weeks against far inferior opponents.
Well,
yes, you.
So all right, I got to say something here, because if we're not going to give Utah a pass for fatigue, I don't think Washington should get a pass either, because Washington's schedule has been way easier than Utah's. Like, Washington hasn't even had to play USC, Utah, Oregon State yet.
Oh, I'm not giving them a pass. I'm saying maybe that's the reason. I can't think of any other reason why they'd be struggling.
Their offensive line has not looked good either. I mean, Penix has been avoiding disaster getting hit the last few games that I've been watching. And I kind of have a theory. I feel like Penix may have been playing through an injury the last 2 weeks, because he just hasn't looked right. He didn't look right against Arizona State. He did do better against Stanford, granted, but their offensive line is not holding up. Like, they're not able to run the ball, and I think that's a huge problem. Like, there's some pretty big red flags here, and it's looking like if nothing drastically changes, like, it's going to catch up to them really quickly, because those next 3 games, there's going to be probably 1 to 2 losses in there if they don't clean it up.
Their next 4 games are brutal, man. They have to go at USC and play Caleb Williams. And look, that defense is terrible. I think they can probably win that game just because they can drop 60 on USC. I mean, that defense isn't going to stop, Michael Penix and boys.
Cal almost did.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, look, if anyone can maybe keep it close, I think maybe Caleb Williams, but I like them to win that game despite it being at USC's 40% capacity stadium. And then Utah has to go play at Washington. I think Washington's a better team, but you can't sleep on Utah. And then luckily Utah is a different team away from home, so they're not as good. I think they might be able to win that. I'd still lean Washington on that to be 10-0, but those 2 games are rough, especially the way that they've been playing. If they don't get it together, they're going to lose one of these games. And then you have to go play in Corvallis against Oregon State. If you play like you have in the last 2 games against Oregon State, you're going to lose. Oregon State is going to beat you. Oregon State is quality enough, especially at home, to take you down. And if you lose right there, you got to go right there and play Washington State, who is a little down right now, but that's still a rivalry game in your own state, and they're going to want to beat your ass. So it's rough, man. I mean, Washington, I'm with you, Shub. I see 1 to 2 losses on that schedule if they don't get it together. And what sucks is if they take 2 losses, they may not make the conference championship game.
I think it's a guarantee they're going to lose at least a game. Like, they are guaranteed to finish at least at best 11-1. Even if they were playing the way that they had been playing the first few weeks of the season, I still would say the same thing. Like, there's just no way. You're not good enough. If you don't have Georgia's roster, you are not going to go 12-0 in that slate. I don't care how good you are. But now that you factor in the way that they have been playing, if they play the way they have been playing, shoot, I'd pick them to lose all the 3 of those games. I think they could completely collapse. If they play the way they have the last 2 weeks, they're going to lose all 3 of those games. And we're going to be talking about, like, this being one of the biggest meltdowns in recent memory. Because, like, I think that's what's coming if they do not get it together. So fair warning, Husky fans, I'm flashing the alarm bells now. You guys got to get it together, because this could be a meltdown. And I hope I'm wrong about that, but I kind of see it coming. So let's talk about, maybe on a little bit more of a positive note, a team that is not melting down. In fact, a team that's, like, if anything, their stock is shooting up right now. And that's the Arizona Wildcats. Got a big upset win over Oregon State last week, Pac-12 After Dark. I was watching that game. 27-24 final score. It was a minor upset, I guess, because they were a 4-point underdog, but still, you beat a ranked team at home. Arizona still is not ranked, by the way, which is, like, kind of crazy, because, like, if they had beaten USC and if they'd beaten Mississippi State, they'd be, like, ranked number 12 or 11 right now. Just, like, couple fair bounces going their way, and they could be, like, 11-1 or 7-1 team. But Zan, I know you want to talk about Jedd Fisch, the head coach
Yeah,
for Arizona.
dude, Arizona's so good. I mean, Jedd Fisch has that program going in the right direction. They were terrible not that long ago. And I got to say, like, they even have a 5-star defensive end coming in next year. He's from Tucson, but you're able to keep the hometown kid. I mean, that's huge. You've got another great quarterback. We were all delirious for Delora last year, but now you've got Noah Fafita here, who
Buzzy
might
for
arguably,
Fafita.
yeah, you might arguably be better than Delora. And
I mean, he is
now
better
it
than
begs the
Delora.
question, yeah, exactly. And then now begs the question, and then you have Trattoria McMillan, and you've got all these other like studs, Jacob
Jacob
Cohen.
Cowing.
Yeah, exactly. They have such a good team. Jedd Fisch has done such a great job of instilling talent in this Arizona roster, and and this is despite USC coming and plucking so many of your best defensive players, and they're still relevant like this. That speaks volumes about coaching. Jedd Fisch is a great coach. He is able to adapt. They are able to develop. How else is Arizona doing this? Like you said, Shub, they could easily be a one-loss team right now. Easily. I think Arizona next year going into the Big 12, they'll probably finish in the top 4. I mean, they're looking very, very good. And all I got to say, man, is the only thing that Jedd Fisch, because hats off to Jedd Fisch. I honestly, like, a coach of the year candidate for me. I know he won't win it, but like legitimately, I think he deserves it. But QB controversy, man. You've got Delora, who's coming back really soon, and then you've got Fafita. We think Fafita's better, but do you sit your guy Delora? Do you sit him?
It's the biggest question because
Absolutely.
you think they sit him?
I would. You got the momentum with Fafita. Jedd's a QB guru. I pulled his CV, and everywhere he's gone, he's coached the quarterback. So I really hope that as someone who's made a career out of knowing how to identify quarterback talent, that in my mind he can make the correct identification and keep running with Noah Fafita, because you've been winning games. The games you have lost have been very competitive. You beat Miss State if you start Fafita, plain and simple. So I think you tell Delora, it's been great, but you might want to go hit that portal again and see what you can do as a grad, because we got our guy, man. And that's not your fault. Injuries happen, but yeah.
I mean, we see this happen all the time. It happens like every other year, I feel like, where you have a starter who's actually pretty solid, and then they end up getting hurt, and then you find out that the backup quarterback, the younger guy, is actually like a gem.
TCU last year, man. Like,
Right.
they bench Duggan, starter gets hurt, Chandler Morris goes down, and they're like, oh man, all of a sudden we're going to the national championship.
It happens all the time, and it is a tough situation to be in if you're a coach. If they can keep Delora somehow for next year, that'd be like amazing. If they keep Delora, man, I don't care what the win total is for Arizona next year. I mean, I think regardless, I think we already know we're going to bet the over on whatever Arizona's line is next year, because they are a huge dark horse team going into next season. But we'll get to that next summer. But yeah, as far as I know, and they mentioned this on the broadcast last night, the dilemma is Jacob Delora. He's more of like the vocal leader, and he's more of a veteran guy. He's a vocal guy in the locker room, and he's kind of been around, and he sort of was the guy that helped, he got brought in from Washington State in the transfer portal a couple of years ago, and he sort of helped with that resurgence. He's been a huge leadership factor in terms of Arizona's just resurgence as a program. So there is that loyalty factor there, and it's sort of like, hey,
He's also taken Fafita under his wing too, and been like his mental support kind of guy.
Yeah, it is going to be an interesting and kind of awkward situation, but hey, I mean, it's a good problem to have. We all say quarterback controversy. It's a good controversy. I like good controversies. I don't like bad controversies. This is a good problem to have if you're Arizona. But enough said. And yeah, really quick, I just think, we keep talking about Mike Elko and Lance Leipold in terms of poach alert. I'm just saying, I think it's going to be pretty quickly here where we're going to start talking about Jedd Fisch on poach alert too. Sorry, Arizona fans.
Absolutely.
It's
especially if they have a great year in the Big 12 in year one. Yeah, Jedd Fisch may be gone.
Yeah.
I will say this is his first ever just collegiate head coaching job outside of being an interim. So and he's only like 47, which blew my mind. I thought he was way older. So be interested to see who comes calling and if he can keep this consistent as they move into Big 12 play.
Yeah, he'd be an attractive option for sure. All right. Well, we've talked a lot of Pac-12 here. Let's move on over into the ACC. Now, guys, the North Carolina Tar Heels, they have done what really angers Shub. And you know what angers Shub is when Shub calls a team a fraud in win totals. He calls them a fraud in the preseason. And they start out 6-0, and they make me look really dumb. And then they get me to say, after their biggest win of the season, you know what? I fold. You guys are a good team. I was wrong. As soon as I say that, as soon as I fold, what do? You lose to Virginia and Georgia Tech back-to-back weeks. Now, see, in some ways, I'm kind of happy because it validates what I said earlier, but in other ways, it kind of makes me mad because I folded. But then again, I do have significant financial stake in the under 8.5, which is back online, baby. Let's go. Sorry, North Carolina fans, but I'm rooting against you so I can have a little bit extra money in my pocket. Yeah, that under is back online, boys. It was dead. I was ready to just like delete that off the sheet and take the L. But that is back online. Let's go. How did this happen?
I don't know what's going on with UNC, man. We thought the defense was improved, and in all fairness, the defense was improving. But here in the last 2 weeks, that has not been the case. I don't know if I honestly don't know what's going on with this team. It seems like they're falling apart at the wrong time. And when Devontae Walker came and got his eligibility and was killing it, I was like, oh man, UNC just took another step forward. You know, they just got even better. Devontae Walker looks like a day 1 or 2 guy, you know? And then all of a sudden, like, they just can't beat these bottom barrel ACC opponents. And now we're talking, in the matter of 2 weeks, we went from talking about UNC potential for what, maybe going to a playoff, maybe competing for a playoff or ACC championship. Now we're talking about UNC like fighting for their life to stay in contention for the ACC championship game. So it's crazy, man. I don't know what's going on with them.
And our best goes out to Tez Walker because he did get hospitalized after that game. He took a really bad hit on a blindside block, and he was hospitalized, but he just got released from the hospital earlier this morning, so he seems to be doing better. But our best goes out to him. But yeah, the defense got shredded by Georgia Tech, and it kind of looked like the old UNC defense, kind of like what you said, Zan. It's been better, but the last 2 weeks, it looks like the old UNC defense from last year. And Georgia Tech is not the type of team that should be running all over you, running for like 8 yards a pop.
Georgia Tech shouldn't be getting 46 on you. That's ridiculous. And you shouldn't be losing to Virginia at home.
No, absolutely not. I was able to watch the very tail end of this game because it got interesting. I mean, okay. I finally got the box score in front of me because I knew that there was a crazy stat in this game. Guess how many, and if you guys don't know, guess how many total yards of offense Georgia Tech had against UNC? Just guess.
I don't know, but I'm guessing it's astronomical. I'm going to go with 600.
460.
635 total yards. You know how many yards Georgia Tech ran for? They ran for 348 yards. And I said 8 yards a pop, criminal. Like I was exaggerating. I was wrong. 9.6 yards an attempt. 9 point. They literally averaged a first down every time they handed the ball off.
They got bullied in the trenches. Dang.
Yeah, and listen, I got a shout out to Haynes King because I watched the tail end of this game. Haynes King was phenomenal. I don't know what happened with him, but he looks like he's been rejuvenated to be the player that he was always made out to be and never was with Jimbo. And
away from Jimbo.
I think that's what happens when Jimbo calls plays. You take a good quarterback and you make him bad.
But yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is, listen, like it's just inexcusable. And it's like, come on, North Carolina. Like you finally looked like the defense turned the corner and then you allow this to happen. Like this is coaching. I said it during win totals. The reason why I was fading his team is because of coaching. I do not like the coaching staff, and the coaching staff seems like it's failing them right now. You gotta have your team ready to be. You got to be teams like this if you want to be treated as a serious contender.
North Carolina is wasting Drake May. North Carolina is not going to have another Drake May.
Nope,
not for a very, very long time. And the best part is for North Carolina is Drake May. He's a UNC, like his family. They're UNC homers. You're not going to lose him. You're not going to lose him to the portal. You're not
He
going to
got
lose them. You know, in Miami, Ohio State, they can't come and say, here's $5 million, come play for me. You know, he's going to be like, sorry, I like UNC. It's my team.
Drake
You're
May
not
got
going to get that
offered
again, man.
he
You're
got
not going to get
offered a
that.
large sum of money to play in
You,
Tuscaloosa, Alabama this
you
season.
beat me to it. He turned down 7 figures to get sold by his defense.
I respect
2
it. I
weeks
respect
in
it.
a row. And he'll still go top 5 because losing 46-42, that's not your quarterback's fault.
Yeah, no, Drake May did his job. He just needs some help. Same about Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams does his job. Just has no help on his defense.
And I might be jumping the gun, but I mean, had Clemson not lost this weekend, I would have really been thinking, wow, Clemson's about to have the worst season in school history by recent standards and still walk into the ACC championship. But it doesn't seem to be the case. We do seem to have a good kind of second running team in Louisville, who I got to stop doubting. I mean, they're really starting to show they're legit. And what are your thoughts on them blanking Duke, UNC's arch rival? I didn't think the Dukies would score 0.
Look, Louisville's better than I thought they were, but I'm still not sold on them being a good team, like a really good team, I should say. I think their record is not indicative of the team they are. I think it's hyperinflated. I mean, they're catching teams on the right weeks. Duke, without Riley Leonard, they don't have Riley Leonard. They're not going to be able to do anything. Legitimately nothing. Like Henry Belford, the Duke of Manchester over there, is not a very good quarterback. He can't get a first down to save his life. That dude can't throw and hit the broadside of a barn. So when you become one-dimensional, and you know that all you have to do is stop the run game, and then their quarterback is going to go throw it to the stands every down, it's pretty easy to stop them, indicated by the fact that they only gave up, 0 points? So, yeah, man. And then we know Jeff Brom, big game Brom. Man, it's just a recipe for Louisville. I think Louisville, and we talked about this in win totals, how their schedule was highly favorable, and that's why they had such a high line. And I think we're seeing that now. And Louisville, in addition to having a favorable schedule, is getting some of these teams when they're at their most vulnerable. And I think they're taking advantage. And look, you can only play who's in front of you. So all credit to Louisville for beating these teams. I think there's a little bit of snake oil here still. I'm not saying they're a bad team. I just don't think they're a one-loss good type of team.
I mean, I think they're kind of rated properly. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. Like, I think they're power rated 22nd in Sagarin, which I think plays to your point. Like 22nd.
I would say 22nd is about right.
Probably.
But one loss at this point, you'd be thinking top 15.
Against a more difficult schedule, they'd probably be a 5-3 or 6-2 team for sure. But they're kind of in the same ballpark power rating wise as Wisconsin, UCLA, UNC, Clemson, Iowa State, Utah, Oklahoma State, kind of that ballpark.
Yeah,
and that's kind of how that seems right. Yeah. But yeah, like you said, man, you just gotta scheduling dynamics definitely plays a huge factor in this. And Riley Leonard, listen, I don't care who says what. Like, Riley Leonard is not 100%. He's just not. He's 9 of 23, 0 touchdowns and a pick, only threw for 121 yards. Can't run the ball either. I mean, he only ran for 13 yards. Like, I'm sorry, Duke, but I think this got mishandled. And I know this is a hindsight, take here. I still think they mishandled the Riley Leonard injury.
No, you beat me to it. You should have completely sold versus FSU. Taking a 56-0 whooping means absolutely would have meant nothing in the grand scheme of getting to Charlotte to have been fully prepared for Louisville. Because now you have the nightmare of you turned in half your homework to FSU and they still failed you. And so then you tried to catch up on your other work against Louisville and you were not ready to go at all. And it clearly showed. And that is just such a shame. Especially me having that 10-win miracle that literally ever since the Sam Hartman scramble that just started going down in flames. But more importantly for Duke, I mean, they're wasting what has really been a really special season for them right now.
And I got to say, like, we talked about this a little bit last week or whenever that happened, that I'm actually the guy in disagreement here. I know hindsight's 2020 and it's real easy to say, well, yeah, he got hurt. You should have taken him out. You should have sold against FSU. I don't feel that way. I feel like you want to beat FSU, you want to step on their throat, you want to solidify yourself, you want to set the tone. And if you think Riley Leonard's healthy enough to do it, then by all means do it. So I don't have any issue with him doing that. But of course, him getting hurt, re-aggravating the injury, I don't know the severity of the injury going into it. But if you felt that he was good enough to go and be competitive enough to win that game, then I think it's worth running him out there. Now, it's unfortunate he got hurt again, but you can't just roll over and lay down against the good teams, especially if you're Mike Elko. Mike Elko, look, he's hearing all the buzz around his name right now. He's hearing everyone's talk about Coach of the Year and all this. Think Mike Elko wants to beat FSU and secure that reward? He definitely does. Do you think Duke wants to beat FSU? Yes, they do. FSU is on cloud nine right now. Everyone wants to take down the top dog. I don't believe in the rollover strategy, but that's just me. And I know what you guys are saying. Roll over, get healthier, play for the conference, work for the conference championship. But man, I understand the decision from a competitive standpoint, the competitive nature of it. And that's why I don't have any issue with it. And I know in hindsight, yes, it's very costly. But in the heat of the moment, I had no problem with it.
And I'll say Mike Elko is making $3.5 million a year. I mean, there's a reason they're paying him and not me to make these decisions. So, somewhat playing onto your side, Zan, Elko did what he felt best and said, deal with it. And I do respect him for that, at least.
And plus, I mean, they knew about the nature of Riley's injury more than we did. So I'm sure Riley felt like he was good enough to play. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it.
Fair points. So as far as Louisville, real quick, we look at the remainder of their schedule. Their last 4 games here. Virginia Tech at home. Virginia at home. Now, that's not just a layup anymore for some reason. Something's happened with UVA that they're no longer the layup. They're more like the landmine. Virginia Tech,
seriously,
too.
Landmine is a perfect way to describe them.
So they have the Hokies and the Cavaliers, both at home. And then they got to go at Miami to finish ACC play, which is going to be tough. And then they end the year against Kentucky in the Bluegrass Showdown. That's what that's called, right? The Bluegrass. I feel
like it's like a governor's, one of those governor cups, but actually,
something like that.
But I like Bluegrass Showdown.
Yeah, but they got Kentucky at home. 3 of their 4 games are at home, and then their 1 road game is at Miami, which
Snakewell Showdown
might not be really a road game. So they got a half a road game. But do you see loss in there? Because I see a second loss in there. Like, this team is just not good enough to do it. And listen, they already lost to Pitt. Remember, they came off of that Notre Dame win and they dropped by 17 points to Pitt. I could totally see Louisville turning around after this huge win and losing to Virginia Tech or Virginia, because Virginia's almost beaten 2 pretty good teams in back-to-back weeks. They did beat a good team. They beat UNC, and then they took Miami to overtime. Like, holy cow. Virginia deserves its own segment.
Maybe Virginia's just figured things out and they're hitting their stride right now. I don't think Virginia Tech's going to be able to beat Louisville, but maybe Virginia, if they keep up what they've been doing here lately, they might be able to snipe Louisville, especially if Brom's just like, oh, that's Virginia. That ain't big game Brom, baby. So
we need big game Brom these next 2 weeks. We don't need letdown Brom. We need big game Brom. But letdown Brom is on serious red alert right now. Like, I might be betting on these Virginia schools the next 2 weeks because of the track record there, but we'll see. But
I think Virginia before Miami, and it's on a Thursday. Not to interrupt, but I think UVA, that's your upset spot right there.
Well,
I think so too.
I would agree. But this kind of leads in the next question then. Who do you think will play FSU in the ACC title game? Because FSU is all but a lock for the ACC championship, and there's a lot of chaos underneath Florida State right now. The question is, who's going to play Florida State? And you look at Louisville's schedule. We just talked about how Louisville probably landmine in there, at least one landmine that they're going to lose to because they're just not. It's Louisville. But that doesn't necessarily mean Louisville still won't get there to Charlotte, because the ACC right now is kind of a crapshoot. If you look at the ACC standings, there's some surprising teams right now in the top when you look at the conference standings. So who do you guys think will be that team that can play Florida State at the end of the year?
Honestly, probably Louisville. I mean, look, I mean, their schedule is very favorable. If they can get through those Virginia schools, there's no stopping Louisville. They're going to be in basically. Um, yeah, man. Louisville and shockingly, Virginia Tech 3-1 in conference play. Hey, I'm glad I took the over on them. Very quietly sealing that for me. But yeah, man, I think Louisville, maybe Miami or UNC can put it together if Louisville's able to lose a couple. But I think Louisville, they control their own destiny right now. So, and their schedule's favorable. So it's looking like maybe an FSU Louisville kind of game.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
going
Louisville will take another ACC loss, but still make the championship game. Like
Yeah,
they will
because
lose another game, but they'll still get there.
Yeah.
Are we completely done with North Carolina? Are we wiping North Carolina out because they're mathematically
With the way
still
they're
in the picture?
playing, man, with the way they're playing, they're bound to lose another game. I just don't, unless they just drastically improve. I mean, how do you lose to Virginia and Georgia Tech? Not only did you lose to Georgia Tech, you let them get 600 yards on you and score 46. Georgia Tech is not known as a top 5 offense, so I think they definitely have another loss baked in there somewhere. And Louisville's schedule is just too favorable, man. I don't see it. There's just no way, unless Louisville has an absolute collapse, which I don't suspect happening. I think it's FSU and Louisville, and I think FSU will run away with that game.
Brom has shown us he knows how to win in divisions that are wacky, hence all his Big Ten West experience. So I think he brings that now over to the ACC.
My God, you're right, Gonzo.
And
The Big Ten West prepared him for this.
And then plays the juggernaut in the conference championship who beats him by 40, but who cares because you weren't supposed to beat FSU anyways. You still go play in a solid bowl, maybe win 10 games.
FSU's going to the playoffs this year. Even if they lose a game in the season, I mean, they're probably going to win the championship game. FSU is going to the playoffs.
I mean, imagine if ACC still had the division set up right now. Because if we had the old Coastal right now, I think the leader in that division would be Virginia Tech, right? Virginia Tech was in the Coastal, and they're 3-1, and then everybody else got 2 losses. It's like that would
Georgia Tech.
Oh my God,
it's beautiful.
That
Coastal chaos, baby.
RIP Coastal Chaos. The Big Ten West has taken that torch. We'll get to them later on. That's going to be fun. But yeah, I agree with you guys. UNC's final 3 games in ACC play: Duke, at Clemson, at NC State. That's tough. You're right, Zan. I think another loss baked it in there. Really quick, though, are we completely writing off Duke or Miami? Is Duke and Miami still have paths to get
Riley
there?
Leonard's going to be out a couple more weeks. I'm writing off Duke. Miami's got a shot. Miami's got a shot. But I feel like with Mario Cristobal's track record, not being a very good game manager, I feel like they're going to choke one away somewhere in there. I can't tell you where, but I think I just don't trust Miami. I mean, yeah.
Well, Miami still has to play Florida State and Louisville.
Oh,
so
if Miami's able to beat Louisville, they got a shot. But they got to beat FSU too.
That's the problem.
I'm writing off Miami. When FSU smokes them in Tallahassee, they're going to quit. And my Boston College upset at the end of the year is going to come to fruition, maybe to get them the bowl eligibility and get that over to hit. But I really think Miami, and this is from when I rooted for them back when I was a teenager. Like, they find a way to get in their own way. Why going to overtime 2 years in a row against Virginia? And then not only that, they had all their timeouts and chose to knee the ball out with Tyler Van Dyke in a quarterback, not what's his face? I can't remember the guy's name, Evan Williams or whatever the quarterback was. So all that to say, bringing it down a notch, I have more faith in Louisville than I do Miami. Or we're talking Duke here. I even have more faith in Duke than I do in Miami.
Well, speaking of losing faith, if you're a Clemson fan, are you losing faith in Dabo now? They lose 24-17 to NC State. Is it time for Clemson to move on from Dabo? Because Clemson has a plethora of talent on their roster still. There's still 5 stars. There's still 4 stars on that roster. There's not really the excuse here. They have the talent discrepancy in their favor, yet they're finding ways to consistently lose. And Dabo, look, he has been the absolute purveyor of, I will not adapt. I don't like what the times have become. I'm very against this. I'm going to do things how they were done in the 1960s. And we're going to keep doing it that way because I've won in the past. And therefore, it's going to work in the future. And it's kind of, catching up with Dabo here. His failure to adapt, his refusal to, I guess, get over himself a little bit. I think Dabo has a little bit of an ego, a little bit of an inflated self-image. That's how I see it from an outsider's perspective. And I think that's really getting in the way of Clemson's success. But the thing is, he's so decorated with the history of Clemson. How long of a leash do you give him if you're the Clemson Tigers brass? Because if this continues, you're going to go from being that 2015 to 2020 perennial, contender, and you're going to drop into one of those mid teams in the ACC, getting trounced by FSU, Miami, UNC every year.
Zan, let me answer your question with a question of my own, a trivia question of sorts. Who caught the game-winning touchdown against them when they played Florida State? Do y'all recall?
I do not recall.
Oh, well, it was Keon Coleman. And did he begin his career at Florida State? I'm pretty sure he did not. I'm pretty sure he was an acquisition through the transfer portal. So all that to say, if I'm the brass, I tell Dabo, listen, if Shane Beamer's up here doing it, you should be too, because Clemson, it's a beautiful place to be in South Carolina. You've established a history there in the last 10 years. Because of you're willing to die on this hill of your ego, and that's how you used to do things. That is such a dumb reason to let teams just surpass you, get a free pass, not even be considered by these marquee guys that go in the transfer portal. The transfer portal is not evil. It is not inherently evil or sinful or anything of that nature. It is an avenue for guys who didn't work out at their first school to go and do something different. You see it with Mertz at Florida, Joe at Burrow at LSU, Travis at FSU. You got 2 billion examples you could use. And if I'm brass, I'll tell them, listen, you either adapt to this or we'll just go and see if we can throw a bag at Dan Lanning or someone who's gladly going to do it. Because this is college football now, dude, and either retire or go to the NFL, because this is the sport, and what you need to do is bring in transfers if you want to win. End of story.
Look, there are great coaches available right now in this particular cycle that I think can be absolute home run hires for big programs and can keep them relevant for a very long time. And you don't see coaches like this necessarily come available every cycle that I feel like that have just this kind of a proven pedigree. Mike Elko, Lance Leipold. If Clemson was able to get a Mike Elko, imagine what he's done over there at Duke with all those 3 stars. You give him a bunch of 4s and 5s. That defense is going to be elite, man. And he's going to find himself a bunch of Riley Leonards that are better than Riley Leonard. And I'm telling you, if Mike Elko went to Clemson, that'd be a problem. Clemson would be back on the map.
I think Dabo Swinney is a victim of his own success here.
Yes.
And what I mean by that, it's kind of like a Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State situation. The program was not good when he inherited it. He brought it up and elevated it to the standard at which it's at. But now it's starting to slip a little bit. And now he's being held to the same standard that he helped build, that he helped raise, which I kind of get it. Listen, I kind of get it, especially when you have these long-term tenured coaches. It's kind of like, well, why are you holding that against me when I'm the one that rose the bar to that level in the first place? I get it from that point of view. Listen, I think it's kind of political in a little ways. Listen, the Clemson brass is not going to fire Dabo Swinney. That's not going to happen, despite what some Clemson fans and the message board Clemson fans are probably screaming for him to get fired right now. Realistically, we all know, the rational fans know that that's not going to happen. He will not be fired, and it's going to take I think multiple bad losing seasons for him to be fired. He's not going anywhere. And unfortunately, it's kind of like Bill Belichick with the Patriots right now. There's situations of this that's happened. It's you can't fire him. You can't. You just can't do that. Oklahoma State with Mike Gundy. If things went south for Oklahoma State, they'd be stuck. You can't fire Mike Gundy. Clemson.
Theirs is more contractual, but yeah.
Well, still, it's still the same. It's still sort of the same idea here. I think it would take a lot for Dabo to be fired, and I think if you're Clemson, the best case scenario for you is that you just sort of treat this year as sort of a wash. And you hope that because Garrett Riley's stock has plummeted a little bit this year, that he doesn't go anywhere, and that you're able to retain Garrett Riley for next year. And of course, you have Cade Klubnik coming back. You have another year of development with Cade Klubnik, retention at OC. And next year is sort of like that switch that flips.
Honestly, I don't think Klubnik's that good. I think Clemson should be looking in the portal for a quarterback to at least push Klubnik.
Well, we know that's not happening. So
I know it's not happening, but man, if Clemson wants to take that next step, that would be the move right there. You need to bring some competition to the room.
yeah, you got to hope that the next step is that switch is flipped with Cade Klubnik, but we'll see. But totally agree with everything about the transfer portal. It's adapt or die, and right now Clemson's dying. All right, moving on into the SEC. A few points here to cover. Tennessee versus Kentucky, I thought was a pretty interesting game between two fairly evenly matched teams. Tennessee came out as the victors in the end. I watched a good bit of this one. Pretty entertaining game, a lot more scoring than I would have imagined. And the thing that really stood out to me about this game was the quarterback play on both sides. I was skeptical of Joe Milton coming in and playing well 2 weeks in a row, especially against Kentucky's defense and in Lexington for that matter. And then on the other hand, what was a pleasant surprise was Devin Leary. Devin Leary had a pretty good game.
Played really well. Yeah.
28 to 39, 372 yards, 2 touchdown passes. I mean, where did this come from? If you're a Kentucky fan, you're like, where the hell was this the first 6 weeks of the year? He looked like he was ready to retire at one point. He was playing through an injury, but something changed with Devin Leary because he looks like the quarterback he was at NC State before. Despite that, however, Tennessee still won this game, and ultimately, what's the final point here about this game here? I think you got to give props to Tennessee. I think this was a pretty gutsy win for the Vols.
I mean, yeah, all credit to Tennessee. Look, we thought with the home atmosphere, Kentucky might be able to edge this one out and good defensive play. But Tennessee, they kind of controlled the game a little bit with their run game, surprisingly. Well, I wouldn't say surprisingly. Tennessee is predominantly more run heavy than they were last year. Less veer and shoot. They run the ball more than they pass the ball. But I got to say, man, just credit to Tennessee. I thought maybe the bottom might fall out a little bit, not completely, but enough to where they could take another loss here. But they're fighting, man, and they're still keeping their hopes alive for the SEC East.
I do think Ray Davis being limited for 42 yards on 16 carries finally allowed Devin Leary to grab the mantle and take charge. And even in a losing effort, if he can keep that going, KU still has a chance. Oh yeah, UK more so. Kentucky still has a chance to hit their over and still jockey for a decent bowl. Good win for the Vols, but I think in the grand scheme, the cocktail party proved that when Georgia shows that they care, it's them and then a cliff and then everybody else. And I think that game at the end of the year, even in Knoxville, it doesn't matter. I think Georgia's completely running the table.
Well, here's what's interesting. They play Missouri this week. Missouri's looked pretty dang good. And
Yeah.
we said in earlier weeks, if there's one team that can probably knock off Georgia this year, it's Missouri. Luckily, Georgia has them at home this year. Big advantage. But yeah, and then they go off and they play a one-loss Ole Miss at home the next week. So very fortunate home away splits here. But then they got to go play at Tennessee. So this actually this is the gauntlet of Georgia's schedule right here. This is 3 really meaty games that they're going to have to win. So if they win these games, they deserve it, man. They deserve it because at the end of the year here, we didn't expect this to be such a gauntlet, but these teams have played really well this year. So I'm interested to see how this pans out. I think there is a chance Georgia could lose one of these games. I think Missouri is their biggest threat, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think they'll handle Ole Miss, and I think they'll handle Tennessee. But I think Missouri is better balanced than Ole Miss or Tennessee. But we'll see. We'll see.
Well, I think you made a great point, Gonzo, about there being Georgia and then a huge separation from everybody else. And listen, I've been the guy on this podcast when we asked this question, can Team X go undefeated? Can Team Y go undefeated? I've been the guy saying, they're going to lose a game. Every team's going to lose a game. Well, Georgia's the one team and maybe Michigan, but Georgia's the one team that I don't think is going to lose a game. I think they're going to finish undefeated. I feel like when I watched at the cocktail party against my Gators, I think Georgia's finally starting to kick it into gear. Carson Beck is playing phenomenal. In fact, right now, I think Carson Beck's 30-1 to win the Heisman. Listen, all I'm going to say is that if I had to take a flyer right now on a guy with long odds that I thought had value, it would be Carson Beck. Because if everybody else kind of plays mediocre down the stretch and Georgia finishes the year undefeated and Carson Beck has great stats, which he does already and he will, because he's got Georgia's offense, Georgia's, talent roster around him. He might actually win the Heisman. Like, I'm just saying there's a chance of that happening. But yeah, I think Georgia's going to go undefeated. I don't think Ole Miss or Missouri, especially at Sanford, which is kind of an underrated home field advantage for them. I think that they're going to win out.
I would be happy with that. I have a ticket on Georgia over 11, so
over 11. Oh man, that is hella push insurance right there. That must have been juiced pretty high, though, I would imagine.
I think it was only like minus 120
for only 11. Man, where could I have gotten that one, man? Jeez. All right.
The site that I'm no longer going to use after this. I won't even shout them out.
We won't mention them. But I will just say this, and this is just a huge wouldn't it be hilarious before we move on. Imagine if Georgia gets through that gauntlet schedule and then they lose to Georgia Tech. Listen, all I'm saying is
that'd be nuts. It's not going to happen, but that would be nuts.
If they turn the ball over like 5 times and Haynes King like plays like a god, then like he did against UNC, all I'm saying is
they'd probably still be in the
pretty
playoffs.
Damn funny.
They would probably still make it too.
Could you imagine? I'm sorry, but could you imagine if they do that and then they lose to Georgia Tech? Like I think college football would explode. I'm sorry, I just gotta throw that out there. All right, enough SEC. We'll pick a big game in the SEC coming up in a little bit here for picks on the other podcast, LSU versus Bama. But let's move on to the Big Ten. Let's wrap it up here with the Big Ten Conference. Not a whole lot to talk about this week. Kind of a sort of a sleepy week in the Big Ten, if you're going to ask me. Ohio State beat Wisconsin 24-10. Not a whole lot of takeaways from that game. I feel like if anything, that game like went almost exactly how everyone probably would have expected it to go. The spread was 14. Ohio State won by 14. It was a low-scoring game. Like, Ohio State is Ohio State. They are what they are. Wisconsin is what they is what they are.
I like
the
that.
big question
is what they is. I like is what they is. They is what they is.
The big question is, it's not Ohio State. In fact, let's not even talk about the Big Ten East. It's not worth it because there's just so much gold right now in the Big Ten West because of that loss by Wisconsin at the hands of Ohio State. The Buckeyes have gifted us a 4-way tie at the top of the Big Ten West with 1 month to go, boys. Let's go. This division is the glorious you-know-what show of all time, and I absolutely love it. Who the hell is going to win this incompetent division of terrible football? Who's going to do it? I'm almost like a cheerleader right now. I love it. Like, it's the last year we have the Big Ten West too.
It's kind of funny, like the teams in the Big Ten West play like they don't want to win the Big Ten West. So, I mean, it'll be really interesting to see who's going to come out of the Big Ten West. If I had to put my money on it, I still say it's going to be Iowa because they have that voodoo, man.
They got
like
the voodoo.
The black necromancer that is Phil Parker, level 100, man. Just like, oh, we need to turn over. Like, legitimately, every time, man. What? Our offense has 12 yards in the fourth quarter, and the game, it's 3-2. We're down by 1 point. Safety. We win 4-3. The black magic. The black magic never fails. Iowa will find a way to win by like something crazy. And the only thing that's going to stop them is if the ref says you called a fair catch.
I think Nebraska has the easiest schedule remaining, but that doesn't mean Iowa's going to go undefeated.
Dude, shout out Matt Rule. Year 1, man.
Yeah.
Year 1.
Listen, I was just about to say, Nebraska has a path to win the Big Ten West. They're right there. They're in the middle of that 4-way tie. Like, the Nebraska Cornhuskers can win the Big Ten West.
I am rooting for Nebraska to win the Big Ten West because the thing about Nebraska is no matter how bad they are and how bad they've been and the grinder that they have gone through in this past decade, they sell out every game. Their fans are incredibly loyal. They have probably, honestly, like in an unbiased, like, I think Nebraska has like the most passionate and loyal fan base in all college football because you can't really say that about some of the big dogs. Are they still going to like sell out and like every single game if they have 5 years in a row where they're completely terrible? No, Nebraska does. Nebraska could go 0-12 and every game would sell out because Nebraska fans are passionate. And so it's so awesome to see Matt Rule have success there. It's awesome to see Nebraska have success. And for all those reasons, I am hoping that Nebraska wins the Big Ten West and, punches their ticket to Indy. They deserve it, man. Like their fan base has been waiting for some kind of fresh breath. And we said here, we thought Matt Rule was a great hire. Look, Matt Rule is doing way more than I thought he would do in year 1. It's awesome, man. Credit to Nebraska. I think Nebraska may here in just a year or two be, like instead of a 3-team race in the Big Ten, it might be a 4-team race with Nebraska in there. Granted, they have a lot of catching up to do in terms of recruiting, but they could be that de facto 4th team. We'll see.
They need it with Washington and Oregon jumping in the mix, so they're picking
that
a
is
good
true.
time to
that
start
is true.
trending upwards.
I forgot about that. That is true.
I hate to say it, but after this year, like none of these teams are going to sniff Big Ten title contention. Maybe Wisconsin with Fickle if you give them a few more years, but that's just the reality. But I mean, let's just celebrate the Big Ten West in its final year here. I just pulled out the schedules real quick. Nebraska does have a tougher remaining schedule. They still have to play Wisconsin in Madison, I believe. Wisconsin has an easier schedule. They have to play Northwestern, Indiana, and then a few other teams.
4-4 though.
Northwestern's better than we thought. But the bad news for Wisconsin is that they have that head-to-head loss to Iowa. So Iowa, for all intents and purposes, is still in the quote-unquote driver's seat if they just win out. But we don't really think Iowa's going to win out because like you can't like have an offense that struggles to throw for 100 yards and not go undefeated, even though they
we always say that, and Iowa finds a way to win.
They lost to Minnesota. I mean, listen, all I'm saying is I think Minnesota has been playing a little bit better than expected, and I think you could say Minnesota could quietly win this division too. The problem for Minnesota is that their remaining schedule is tough. They're not going to win it because they still got to go Illinois, at Purdue, at Ohio State, and then Wisconsin. So Minnesota might be the best team, but they're not going to win it because they still got to play Ohio State. I don't know about the best team.
Minnesota's bad, man.
They're bad, but they
can't move the ball.
They beat Iowa 2 weeks ago.
I know.
You could argue they probably shouldn't have beaten Iowa, but they did beat Iowa, and then they just beat Michigan State.
Northwestern.
Northwestern just beat Maryland, though. Like we said Maryland was
lost
like
what 2 or 3 in a row now. Like it's crazy.
Maryland just lost to Northwestern, so I don't really think that looks that bad anymore. Yeah, I still listen. I'm going to say Iowa. I kind of want it to be Iowa or Nebraska. If I'm to be perfectly honest,
I want it to be Nebraska for the sake of my team draft. I would like Iowa, but
it'd be good for Wisconsin fans and Luke Fickell. But we all know like they got better days ahead for them, but I think Wisconsin would be sort of a boring outcome here if they won it. I kind of want Iowa just for the entertainment factor, and then Nebraska for the feel-good factor, but that's just me speaking from the heart here. All right. Well, it's just the Big Ten West is there's a chance that there could be a 5-way tie. Like I saw some tweet about it. There is a chance that like at the end of the year there could be a 5-way tie for first place in the Big Ten West. Could you imagine if that happened? I'm just saying that'd be crazy. All right, quick Heisman update. We kind of already dived into this a little bit when we talked about Carson Beck a few minutes earlier, but I just kind of want to sort of read the tea leaves here, sort of get a grasp of the pulse of the room real quick. Now that a few weeks has passed since Zan asked me that infamous question about who I picked to win the Heisman, and I said that if I had a gun to my head, I'd be dead because I couldn't pick a certain player. Well, listen, all I'm going to say is I think I have my answer. But that answer does require some help in the win-loss column.
Well, that's obvious. I mean, the Heisman, it's not awarded to teams with a lot of losses. You have to have a successful team despite your individual stats.
So I think that right now, if I had to vote for the Heisman winner, I would vote for Jayden Daniels. And that is only because he has been the best player, despite the fact that LSU has 2 losses, which is not his fault. They're entirely due to the defense. It's not his fault that his defense sucks. Same thing with Caleb Williams. It's not his fault that his defense sucks. Now, I say Jayden Daniels. A lot of people aren't going to say Jayden Daniels because they're fools that think that the quarterback also plays defense. And they vote based on how the team did, not how the player plays. So that's my answer right now.
Well, our weekly draft would indicate, because Gonzo always takes Jayden Daniels, and Jayden Daniels always puts up 30-40 burger. So, like, I mean, it's pretty trite and true, man. So, I mean, that speaks volumes in itself. Michael Penix, Caleb Williams, both great players, but they've both had a couple bad weeks this season. So I don't know. It's not truly a gimme. And then if Ollie Gordon keeps dropping 200 yards a game, I mean, he's going to be in the conversation too. So we'll see, man. We'll see.
If Ollie leads Oklahoma State, A, past the Sooners, and B, to a Big 12 championship.
Oh, then he'll get it. He'll win.
Title.
Yeah.
He will join Barry Sanders.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. That's the only way. That's the only way.
Yes.
Yep. But yeah, the only thing that's going against Ollie is, of course, that he plays for Oklahoma State. So that's the biggest problem.
And that's why Gonzo's scenario has to play out exactly for Ollie Gordon to win. Ollie Gordon can rush for 1,800 yards, despite the fact that he really didn't play in his first 3 or 4 games. Like, he only had like 3 carries in each game, and still not win it if they don't win the conference.
But it's when you catch fire too. Sometimes you have that one upset. I mean, I think of RG3. He's kind of, or even Johnny. When Johnny beat Bama, and that was in November. People were like, I'm pretty sure it was November. Like,
I think it was a little earlier in the year,
maybe like October. Yeah. But the point is, it was midpoint of the season. So I mean, man, if Ollie can get on the national radar and run against this Sooners defense, and again,
I'll tell you what, right now, I think Ollie's going to win the Doak Walker at least. And
he should.
And legitimately, he's had over 250 yards back-to-back weeks. The last person to do that is Barry Sanders.
See?
That's nuts.
Yeah. So, and Ollie Gordon, man, we'll see. I think OU is going to be the best defense that they've played this year. Given like talent discrepancy, 4 or 5 stars, just athletes, just dudes. So we'll see. Obviously, OU. One thing I've noticed about OSU, man, is their offense picked up because they were able to run the ball with Ollie Gordon. So I think OU is just going to plug it up, stack the box, and make OSU beat them with someone that isn't Ollie Gordon. And we'll see, man. I don't think Ollie's going to have a huge game against OU, but if he does, man, that's going to be the chef's kiss, and people are going to start talking about him being in New York at the end of the year.
I would agree really quick with Jayden Daniels. My advice to you, if you're big on LSU, if you really believe in LSU beating Alabama this week, now is the time to buy your Jayden Daniels Heisman stock, because right now he's 4-1 on DK. If you believe in LSU beating Alabama, then now is the time to buy low on your Jayden Daniels Heisman stock, because if they beat Alabama, Jayden Daniels will automatically become the Heisman frontrunner. I'm telling you right now, if they beat Alabama, Jayden Daniels will be the frontrunner, because that's just kind of the year that it's been. So now is the time if you believe. And I might do that myself, but we'll see. But yeah, Jayden Daniels, number 1 in total yards, number 1 in yards per play, number 1 in yards per game in the entire country, total offense. I think that speaks for itself. All right, moving on to our playoff ranking predictions. Do you guys want to do this first? Do you want to cover G5 really quick and then save the
let's
the
scrap through the
G5
just because we're going through everything real quick, and then let's get into that.
All right, let's not spend a whole lot of time on this, but it does deserve its recognition. We got to give some love to the G5. As of right now, the college football playoff rankings are almost upon us. They're on the horizon. They come out Tuesday night. And the question is, who's going to be the G5 representative in the New Year's Six Bowl at the end of the year? You have the number 17 Air Force Falcons at 8-0, the Liberty Flames at 8-0, the James Madison Dukes, who are 8-0, who are not eligible for the postseason. But Gonzo has a little bit of a quirk on that. One quick follow-up with James Madison, though. There is some hope. We'll get to that in a second. You have number 21 Tulane, who is 7-1, definitely a player. And then you have 7-1 Toledo, 7-1 Fresno State. That's the short list of teams that I think all have realistic chances to be the G5 representative.
Hey, all credit to Fresno State. They just beat Michigan's toughest opponent, UNLV.
Yes. Hey, they beat the smack out of Arizona State a while ago there. So that win actually kind of looks a little bit better now. I'm just saying.
If I had to pick one, I can't have Willie coming up my door. I'll go Tulane, but man, I'd love to see the Falcons play in a New Year's Six game.
Right now, Air Force is power rated as the highest group of 5 team in the country, not named SMU. The problem with SMU is that they have 2 losses already. So that's what SMU has to overcome. There is still an outside shot for the Mustangs, who have just been annihilating teams, but we'll see.
That's a shame because one's OU, and then I forget who else beat SMU.
TCU.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so you lost to two, Big 12 stars there, so that's just a shame because SMU's just been bodying teams the last few weeks.
But listen, Air Force, really quick. I would imagine Air Force is the highest ranked team at the end of the year, but their remaining schedule, do you think they can go 12-0? Their remaining schedule, Army, who sucks, at Hawaii, who sucks, but it is at Hawaii, UNLV at home, interesting, and then they end the year on the blue turf at Boise State.
That's 11-1 and 12-0 right there.
I think so too. Listen, they might be able to do it. Liberty too. Liberty.
I drafted Air Force this year in the team draft, so let's get it.
You do not know how salty I am about that, man. I was a year early.
And I think they were like my last pick too.
They were. They were the third to last pick of the entire draft. That was a hell of an amazing pick. Also, Liberty's remaining schedule: Louisiana Tech, Old Dominion, UMass at UTEP. Liberty might be finishing 12-0.
They're going to win and not get ranked because CUSA is so soft, which is rightfully so, though. I mean, it is a weak.
Yeah, CUSA is very soft.
CUSA is easily the worst conference in the it's terrible. But Liberty's a quality G5 team, and Caden Salter, their quarterback, is actually like a legit quarterback who I think could start at like a lower level Power 5 program. But just FYI, those are some players, and I think an undefeated G5 team is definitely on the table. Most likely Liberty, potentially Air Force. James Madison, though, real quick. Yes. Gonzo, what do you have to say about James Madison? So this is breaking news.
I came across this tweet 9 hours ago from our friend Brett McMurphy, and I'm going to read it verbatim, so there's not even interpretation. Here's what Brett said. 4 weeks remain, and we have 40 bowl-eligible teams for 82 spots. This does not include James Madison and Jacksonville State. If there aren't enough bowl-eligible teams, JMU and JSU would be selected first to fill any openings, followed by the 5 and 7 teams. So if I read that correctly, if enough teams fumble down the stretch, the Dukes and the Cox can indeed go bowling in December.
At least one of them will. I mean,
more so the Dukes probably, but still, it's something. It's something.
Yeah, I still hate that, man. The fact that they can't play for their conference championship when they have been the best team in their conference like 2 years in a row.
Agreed.
Being their first, like as soon as they level up, they're already dominating their conference in back-to-back years, and they can't take any hardware for it. That's atrocious. You get penalized for coming up to another level. It's hard enough to come up to another level as it is. Look at Sam Houston, who in the in what FBS 2 or 1B, whatever it's called, FCS,
yeah,
wherever they were, yeah.
They were
competing for the national championship. Then they come up to the CUSA, which is dog water, and they're 0-7, 1-7, 0-8.
May not win a game.
I mean, it's not easy to do. And look at JMU here. I'm surprised no one's talking about poaching their head coach. But hey, great work, JMU. Great work.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Hey, JMU, listen, if they do get that bowl eligibility and they go undefeated, which is going to be tough because the Sun Belt's pretty competitive, but if they do that, they got that Power 5 win against Virginia on their resume, which, listen, I know that's not necessarily like an amazing Power 5 win, but Virginia the last 2 weeks, they beat UNC and took Miami to OT. So that all of a sudden actually looks like somewhat of a quality Power 5 win. Just saying. So could be significant down the road, but we shall see.
And for those wondering at home, so JMU's head coach is Curt Cignetti. His daddy, Frank Sr., is like a Hall of Fame level head coach. And his brother, Frank Cignetti Jr., is the OC, I want to say at Pitt.
That's right.
He is. Yeah, he is the OC. So, maybe he brings maybe if whoever poaches Curt, you can bring Frank with him and they can, make some good things happen. The point is, he comes from a good pedigree.
If Pitt gets rid of Narduzzi, maybe that's the next man up.
There you go. Yeah.
Ooh, I like that. All right. Well, guys, it is time to unveil the curtain. The College Football Playoff Committee will unveil their first edition of the 2023 rankings this week on Tuesday night. We're going to definitely make some content pivoted off of that. Very interesting every year, especially the first rankings, because every year the committee is made up of different people, different mindset, different voices in the room, different criteria is valued more. So it's very interesting to see how the committee releases their rankings the first week, and it sets the precedent for what they're going to do the rest of the season. Well, the Saturday Scholars have come up with our own college football playoff rankings. We have taken a composite of the three of us, and we are ready to unveil the curtains, but we're going to do the top 10 because, top 10 is what matters most. So let's do it. All right. Are you boys ready? Do we want to go 1 through 10, or we want to go 10 to 1?
10 to 1. Come on.
10 to 1. All right. Let's do it the dramatic
CFP
way.
playoff selection style.
Let's go. All right. Drum roll, please. At number 10 in the Saturday Scholars Week 10 college football playoff rankings, we have the Penn State Nittany Lions by a huge margin, actually. So there is a pretty good gap between Penn State and the rest, but Penn State comes in at number 10, very fittingly there. At number 9, we have the Oklahoma Sooners, who have dropped a little bit in real life after losing to Kansas, but they are still very much in the mix. A huge talking point is going to be what they do between Oklahoma and Texas head-to-head. How much does that head-to-head win for OU factor in? Well, unless we have Texas ranked below 10, you can kind of tell we have Texas ahead of OU. So, but we shall see. At number 8, the Alabama Crimson Tide. At number 7 is the Texas Longhorns. So as I just said, we have Texas ranked ahead of OU, but they are all in the same tier. If we could do this by tiers, which is the way I like to do things, we would do them, but that's not how the public likes to do it. So anyways, at number 6, the Oregon Ducks. At number 5, the Washington Huskies. Good head-to-head applied there, plus Oregon has that loss. Washington's still undefeated. At number 4, the Michigan Wolverines. That one might draw some little bit of spice there, a little sizzle on the pan with Michigan at number 4. Zan, I think you were a huge anchor on that ranking right there.
Yeah, so in my ranking, I had Michigan at 6. And the reason I had Michigan at 6 is because Michigan hasn't played anybody. And look, I know that they've won all their games by dominant margins, but look, Ohio State, I have to award them. Ohio State has beaten good teams. They've played competitive schedule so far, and they're doing great. Have to award Ohio State. FSU is undefeated. They have played some good teams on their schedule. Washington and Oregon. Washington's undefeated. Oregon, I think, is better than Washington despite losing to Washington. And yeah, and they have played tough schedules. I can't justify putting them over a team whose best win is UNLV. I just can't do it. And I know that they've been good, but I am a see it to believe it kind of guy. You have to prove it to me before I'm willing to put you in the conversation.
Hey, now Rutgers has something to say about that. I think
the
Rutgers
and
Knights
UNLV
have something to say about that, man.
The absolute giants that Jim Harbaugh had to steal their plays and any hopes of beating them. Oh my God.
I think that point speaks for itself. All right. Hey, listen, as long as there's a justified argument for everything, there's no wrong answers here in our polls. And of course, if you're a Michigan fan, you're like, what? You can't have us at number 4. What the hell, John? Well, dude, guess what? Like, when you play Penn State, and if you beat Penn State, you're going to jump. So don't worry about it.
That's true. If you beat Penn State, you beat Ohio State, you jump. But hey, the nature of this is see it to believe it. You still have options on your schedule to prove it, and 4 is still a playoff spot. So,
right. Yes, exactly. No, exactly. So either way, we got Michigan inside the top 4 with a ton of upside to jump real quick here when they play Penn State and Ohio State, obviously. All right. Number 3, we have the Florida State Seminoles coming in with a very good resume. At number 2, we have 2 remaining teams, Georgia and Ohio State. Who is 1, who is 2? At number 2 is the Georgia Bulldogs. Ohio State is our number 1 team, boys. And that was in large part thanks to yours truly right here. I put Ohio State as my number 1 team purely because of resume. I think, you got to take resume in this. That's how I did my poll. I had Ohio State number 1. I think I had Georgia at number 3 or 4. I think I had Georgia at number 4, actually. So that really brought Georgia down. Yeah. You guys both had Georgia at 1. I had them all the way down at number 4. So that really dragged Georgia down. But Ohio State narrowly passes Georgia for the number 1 spot. I think Ohio State should be number 1 because they have the best resume of all the teams. They got that big win over Notre Dame. They have a big win over Penn State, which is a top 10 win. Not a lot of other teams have that. I think Ohio State should be 1 purely based off of resume. But again,
if I was argument. I had Ohio State at 2, and the resume argument is exactly why I have Michigan at 6.
If I would take Michigan over Ohio State right now on a neutral field, I'd take Georgia right now over Ohio State on a neutral field.
Yeah, but it's resume argument.
But I have Ohio State ranked higher than both of them because of resume. That's how it works, folks. All right. Well, one more time, real quick. Ohio State, Georgia, Florida State, Michigan, Washington, Oregon, Texas, Alabama, Oklahoma, Penn State. That's our top 10. What are you guys' initial thoughts before we move on?
I think that's a solid top 10 to get into our first set of rankings. And we'll learn more as we go through November.
Quick prediction.
He looks down as he's like, my Tigers aren't in there. He's like, we'll learn more.
They were definitely, well, I'll give them this. They were one of the first 2 teams out.
I put them 13th, so it's not.
But
I forget where I had them, but I had them in the top 15.
Yeah. All right, real quick. Who do you think the committee will put at number 1? What do you think the committee will?
I think the committee will put probably it's going to be Georgia. Well, 1 and 2 is going to be Georgia, Michigan by the committee. I don't know which order. I would think Georgia, just because they're defending national champions, so they'll put Georgia at 1, and I think they'll slot Michigan at 2. That's what I think the committee is going to do. And then I think they'll probably put FSU at 3 and Washington at 4. That's what I think the committee will do.
Remember last year, the opening rankings had Tennessee at number 1. Remember they had Tennessee at number 1 last year when they played Georgia? So they might go resume here, and that's why I think they're going to do what I did. I think they're going to put Ohio State at number 1.
I hope they do. Resume should matter, and that's why Michigan was dropped on my list. It's not a matter of me hating on Michigan. They won dominant, but they haven't played anybody. So,
Gonzo, who do you think?
For the top 4?
No, who do you think they'll put at number 1?
Oh, I think Georgia because SEC bias.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, it'll be very interesting. I think the rankings that matter the most are the first ones, because that's really where you see what the committee's headspace is at and how they value certain things. And then the last one's what really actually matters. The rest in between is all just for TV rankings and stuff, which is, by the way, I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on right now. You will see the Oklahoma State Cowboys in the rankings because they play ABC against Oklahoma on primetime.
Yep, and you got to draw viewership.
Yep. Cowboys are going to slide in there right at the end.
And this is how done the AP voters are, man. They have Kansas State and Kansas both ranked, but not Oklahoma State ranked, who beat both of those teams and has also 2 losses. Makes no sense.
So to play devil's advocate, that blowout loss to South Alabama at home is a pretty definitely big blemish on the resume. Listen, all I'm going to say is that, if that was any other team and they had that loss, that was a horrendous loss on there. That's a pretty big blemish on a pig, if I'm going to say it that way. But I mean, that is true. 2 good wins against the Kansas schools. So we'll see. You can make arguments both ways. All right. Let's dive into Shuby Snacks, Zany Bars, and Gonzo Grudges. I'll make this quick. I only have 2 Shuby Snacks. There's a lot of ways I could go, but I think there's 2 finalists that I had this week for Shuby Snacks. Number 1, Georgia Tech quarterback Haynes King. Who thought that Haynes King would ever get a Shuby Snack? Well, he got one because he completely dominated against UNC. Georgia Tech on the ground did as well. 23 of 30, 287 yards passing, 4 touchdown passes, 1 interception, and on the ground, 8 carries for 90 yards as well. So Haynes King was quite the dual threat quarterback, effective through the air and on the ground, and he helped beat them. UNC pulling off the upset, and fans stormed the field and everything. I feel like Haynes King is a guy that, his stock probably dropped after he lost A&M, but I think he's a guy that maybe you could put the stock up arrow back back in place now, and that he may have had a revival at Georgia Tech, and I'm happy to see it for him. And this could be an instance of the transfer portal doing good for certain players, and I'm happy for the guy. So it's amazing what happens when you take the Jimbo Fisher chains off you. All right. My final Shuby snack for week 9 goes to the Oregon Ducks. We talked a lot about this, but for all the reasons that we said earlier, I think that just the fashion in which Oregon went into Utah and Salt Lake City and beat them, it was pretty damn impressive. 35-6. The fashion in which they did it, it was surprising. We were all surprised by it. I bet a lot of people were surprised by it too. That's the making of an elite team right there, if you ask me. Bo Nix is playing phenomenal. I got to give a Shuby snack to Oregon. Got to call a spade a spade. Oregon is looking like a wagon right now. And we all said earlier on this podcast that we would pick Oregon to win the Pac-12 against any other team in the field as of today. So, Shuby snack to the Oregon Ducks.
Well, now it's time to dive into the negative part of college football, and that's with Zanny Bars. If you're a fan, you're a coach, you did anything in the world of college football that deserves to be shat on, we got you covered here with Zanny Bars. All right, my first one, North Carolina. We got to pile on, guys. North Carolina, kind of the, you're the pro, I'm the con. The pro is Haynes King. The con is UNC. What are you doing allowing Haynes King to get 46 points on you? Back-to-back weeks losing when you were top 15 on the fringe of being in the playoff conversation, and you guys just fall apart and become the defense of last year. What's going on, UNC? I just don't understand. And you have a great quarterback in Drake May, and you probably won't have another quarterback like Drake May for a very, very long time. So you're wasting him. Absolute waste. Completely inept coaching staff over there at North Carolina. It sucks to see them waste such great talent that they have on that roster. My second, Zanny Bar. Go ahead.
If we're gonna rip on USC and Lincoln Riley for wasting Caleb Williams, a generational quarterback with horrendous defense, then we gotta fairly rip on UNC for the same exact reasons, because those two schools have the top 2 quarterbacks in this draft class,
and
they're
both of them have no defense. It's unfortunate, but yeah. So speaking of a team who's really been struggling, and it doesn't really segue well. For my second Zanny Bar, I'm going to go to a team who talked a lot of smack moving up into a new league this year and thought they were going to dominate it and win it in year 1. UCF, 0-5 in Big 12 play. And look, the newcomers are all struggling. Cincinnati also doesn't have a win, of which UCF plays this week. And yes, UCF, I know JRP was hurt for about 2-3 games, but still, you guys have yet to win a single game in Big 12 play. You got to put your money where your mouth is. There was a lot of talking, but the checks aren't cashing right now. And look, I think UCF, this isn't me just hating on UCF. I think UCF has a bright future. I think UCF, they're recruiting very well right now. If they can just get some things figured out, then maybe there's something that can be said about that. But right now, you guys got to be quiet. You guys got to be quiet. You're in a new league, and you got to work your way up. Speaking of that, let's keep it in the Big 12 for my final Zanny Bar. Devin Neal. Look, didn't Kansas win? Yeah, Kansas won. Could have Kansas have potentially blown that? Absolutely. I was livid. There was like a minute left in the game. All Devin Neal had to do, because OU was letting him score, was go down at the 1-yard line, burn the remainder of the clock because OU had no timeouts left, kick a chip shot field goal to win. But Devin Neal says, "No, bro, I'm going to score. I got to pad my stats." So Devin Neal runs into the end zone, gives OU a whole minute to try to score the ball, which could have easily have lost them the game. Thank goodness the defense came through. Kansas is able to hang on.
They
almost did. And I thought for sure when OU got that one big chunk play, I'm like, here it comes. Here it comes. OU's going to pull this crap off and win the game. And no. So Devin Neal, for making me and the Jayhawk fans sweat like that, it's entirely on you, brother. I don't care how good of a running back you are. You're one of the best Kansas has had in a really long time. And he's a hometown kid. But no, that was just brain dead behavior. Know the situation. Go down at the 1.
Man, what are we going to do next year when Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are separated? What are you going to do, man? The hatred runs deep, man. The hatred runs deep in that rivalry. I'm gonna miss it. But yeah, that's the situation I think a lot of players should probably be aware of, and that's just coaching at the end of the day. Like, you got to tell your guys, listen, if you get into this situation, go down at the 1 yard line, bleed the clock out. Like, but most of the time they don't do that. Sometimes they do. That's just a football IQ 101. All right, Gonzo, what do we got here? Gonzo's grudges.
Well, I only got one grudge, and this is something that legitimately infuriated me. I'm leaving Albertsons, picking up Cool Whip, and I want to say cookies. Driving back to my girlfriend's, and at a red light, I check the score, and then I see that Northwestern beats Maryland. Are we serious? This is the worst freaking team in the conference. They fired their coach because his players were doing some just, frat stuff in the locker room. This team's supposed to be trash. 1-11. And this is retroactive to Minnesota too. Because of Maryland screwing around and Talia Tagovailoa not being like his brother, meaning exactly what I expected, you have cost me the Northwestern under, and you and the freaking Golden Gophers have both cost me at least pushes, because I really don't think either of those teams can reach 7 wins of how the schedule plays out. So thank you very much for dropping what should be the easiest game of the year to the Wildcats. I was so flipping mad. I can't even begin. And good for Northwestern. You proved me wrong, and watch, they'll mess around and win a bowl game now while they're at it. But yeah, Maryland, gosh, both you and Minnesota, both the M schools. I mean,
this is the second time Maryland's caught some strays here, because I was pissed at them when they didn't cover against Ohio State. So
Dude,
this is the second grudge.
Like, I don't have money. I don't have money on the Northwestern under, but I have money on the Maryland over, and they're looking like they may not even hit it now.
Because with UNC, it's hard to get mad because it's legitimately like kind of comical. Like, they do this every year. So it was in Virginia. It's like, okay, yeah, that's aggravating, and I still might lose that over, and that is annoying. And they might get a retroactive one when they finish 8-4, and I might do this to them retroactively. But Northwestern even played Ben Bryant. You lost to what, Sullivan, whatever his name is. I mean, Brendan Sullivan. Are you serious, man?
You lost to a guy. The coach doesn't even know his name. And
you pride yourself on defense, and you give up 30 plus to Northwestern.
Northwestern almost lost to Howard earlier.
You were beating Ohio State at one point this year. So
yeah.
Seriously, the Wildcats.
That team is weird, man. I don't know.
Hey, listen. We said it during. Listen, we said it during win total. This is why I warned you guys. You guys were very steadfast in the Maryland over, and I did take over too. But I was very hesitant because Loxley is known to do this. Like, he plays up and down to his opponents. Last year, Maryland
starting 5-0. I thought that was a lock. Now I'm not so sure.
And honestly, I think I did give one to Minnesota, but I just want to hit it again, because again, like, you got to take these wins where you can playing in this league, and it's just frustrating. But good for Northwestern. Seriously, I didn't think they'd do a whole lot enough, and you won 4 games. That's a good year. Take the interim tag off. Who am I kidding? Maybe hire like Leopold or Elko or something, and hope to make a bowl game every year. But that's my only grudge for today.
I would agree with that. I think they should probably take the interim tag off, because 4 wins is way above expectations. I think even Northwestern fans probably didn't think they'd be 4-4 at this point. But before we sign off here, just really quick, I have an honorary Shub grudge because, dude, 2 money line sprinkles for me this week. I took Cal plus 320, and I took Southern Miss plus 675 to beat App State.
My friend.
Fading 2 teams that I think are on quit alert for the rest of the year. Cal had a 14-point lead with 13 minutes left in the fourth quarter, blew it, lost. Southern Miss had a 10-point lead going into the fourth quarter against Appalachian State, blew it, and lost. Are you freaking kidding me, dude? You know how much money I could have won off of those money lines, dude? Those were like Hail Marys.
They were both looking good at halftime, too.
Dude, both of them went into the fourth quarter, and I was like, I'm about to make a shit ton of money this week. But nope. It's too good to be true. So that's a minor Shub grudge right there.
That's what sucks about betting, man. That stuff turns so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I get for doing money line sprinkles, but I don't recommend doing that. I do it every now and then, but I'm still positive on the year, albeit barely. But Anyhow,
Shout out Caldo.
yeah, shout out to Cal for putting up what the Cal and USC combined for 99 total points in that game.
Yeah, nuts.
Like, defense was optional.
Alex Grinch should be unemployed next year. I mean, I never want a guy to not get his livelihood, but he at least should be unemployed with USC.
He's making $1.8 million to be like the worst defensive coordinator.
And shout out to the fans. Shout out to oh, dude, come on. I almost forgot about this. You know what we should have had a Zanny bar for was the protest at the Cal game before.
Yes.
Anyone ever figure out what they were protesting? Hey,
no.
Veganism, baby.
One, nobody could figure out what they were protesting, and two, all the jokes on Twitter was saying I saw people saying they were protesting USC's defense.
Yeah, I saw that.
Honestly, that would be pretty funny. Listen, if I was a fan, and listen, if I was a student at one of those California schools, I would probably organize that, because that would be pretty hilarious to protest like the defense.
Hey, Zanny bar to them, because if you're going to protest, that's one thing. But how are you going to protest and then no one knows what the hell you're protesting for? You're just protesting to protest at that point.
Yeah, so at least have a giant sign that says I'm protesting USC's defense.
Something
that would at least make more sense to me.
For protesting vegetables, wherever you're out there, at least make it known what the hell you're protesting. Like,
protesting the lack of emphasis on form tackling in practice
and coverage.
Yeah, that was the most stereotypical Cal versus USC game I think you could draw possibly. But anyhow, all right, guys, we hit a lot of topics this week, a lot of interesting things, college football playoff rankings among the many important things coming up this week. Should be interesting. Look out for some content this week on the platform on YouTube. We'll be putting out a lot of videos and shorts for you guys and reacting to the playoff rankings, among other things. So look forward to that. But anyways, we have gone pretty long today. I think about an hour, 40 minutes or so, somewhere around there. So a lot to talk about per usual, but we love doing it. This is the Saturday Scholars for Zan, Gonzo, and Shub signing out. See y'all later and enjoy your college football Saturday.